Now, our first guest this evening is one of my all-time favorites, my old friend. Seems so long we've been talking about the same subjects, Garland. We keep trying to get out, but they keep pulling us back in. I don't know where to start, but let me start with the allegation that Kamala Harris is a communist. Does that not sum up the absolutely unhinged nature of American politics?
Yes, it does, and in fact, George, I think it does something else. It shows the commonality in view between the two parties. It exposes the duopoly because while the Democrats do all of the imperialist stuff worldwide, they go after Venezuela and China and Cuba, the same exact socialist states that the Republicans demonize. The Republicans actually attack the Democrats from the right for using words that imply that there could possibly be problems in the market. Now, we already know that the Democrats have no intentions of addressing any problems in the market, and that's hollow rhetoric. But it allows both parties to create this Overton window where you can only talk about how well the market works or doesn't work, and reiterate that any criticism of the free market libertarian style politics is communism, is must be demonized.
Yes, I mean, these are people who think that anyone talking about the right of the American people to free health care, which they allow and pay for in Israel, by the way, the American public and the American Congress gives money to Israel to provide free health care to Israelis, whilst describing the idea of health care for all in the United States as communism. That's the long and the short of it, isn't it?
Yes, it is. It in fact is. And also during that speech, Kamala Harris, took out of the Republicans' talking points book. One of the things that she said was that she was going to use deregulation to create jobs and to strengthen the economy. So she was using their own language. She went on to say, well, actually, people are saying that she said she was going to address price gouging. I don't really think she knows what it means, because if you listen to the speech, she's actually said price gauging. And I'd never heard of that term before Kamala Harris made it up. So she's going to somehow address a new problem that we have called price gauging that has been interpreted as price gouging. But there's no substance to it. The Biden administration has been in office nearly 4 years. The problems that the American people are facing has been compounding the entire 4 years. And now, 2 months before the election, Kamala Harris has some rhetoric that's going to cure all of those problems that, quite frankly, we all know would never get through Congress, even if she intended to try, which she doesn't.
She, on the other hand, calls him a fascist. In what way is he a fascist? What revolutionary change did he bring to America when he was last in office? What revolutionary change of a fascist variety is he likely to bring if he gets another term? I would have thought he's going to do business as he did it before if he comes back to office.
Well, one of the things that we have is name calling. You're a communist. No, you're a fascist, which are simply the terms that, are acceptable to be used in the context of American politics if you're faking to be the right or faking to be the left. But the fact of the matter is that Kamala Harris doesn't discuss what fascism really is. It's part of a system. It's a systemic problem. So they say he's a fascist as though if Donald Trump comes into power, just his presence alone will create a dynamic where the entire country will turn fascism, but they don't exactly discuss what that term means. And the Biden administration pushed further and further towards, full government control. And as you probably know, you've interviewed Scott Ritter recently, to a dramatic, draconian crackdown on those who dissent against this really sick system that we're experiencing.
Yeah, that was to be my next point. Do they mean by fascism putting journalists behind bars for more than a decade. In the case of Julian Assange, do they mean by fascism raiding journalists with the FBI like Scott Ritter? Do they mean operating with their hand up the back, social media platforms to dictate what the rest of us can read, hear, see, and to ghost and strangle those that they don't like? Is that what they mean by fascism?
Well, if you really look into the level of discourse in the liberal world in the Democratic Party these days, you understand that they don't have to mean anything by it. That it's just become hollow name calling. That it's Trump is a fill in the blank. You make up a name, you throw it at him, and then all of the people around, all of the people in the brainwash cult will repeat that. I mean, look, if you look at. I've been listening to some of Kamala Harris's speeches lately, and she'll be giving a speech, and during the speech, she'll just say a couple of words at some point. They're fairly meaningless. And the entire crowd will start chanting those words over and over and over without any real meaning or context to the word. So I think at this point that the Democratic Party has successfully, using propaganda, using the intelligence community, has successfully brainwashed their constituents to a point where they don't have to say or do anything substantive. They don't even have to promise them anything anymore. They can simply say, elect us or Donald Trump is going to be in, and terrible things are going to happen. We're not even going to define those, and we're not going to explain to you why the last time he was in, none of those terrible things happened. So we're looking at really a non-substantive party. I'm not saying that the Republicans are much better, but to be quite frank, I think that the Republican Party, there is a foundation there that has a healthy mistrust of government, albeit misguided in the policies that would fix that government, but they have a little bit of a healthier mistrust of government as opposed to the Democratic Party, which really now sees themselves as the protectors of the system. Like, they have convinced their constituency that they are protecting a just system from Donald Trump corrupting this system.
Yeah, if you asked me, if you forced me to choose, I'd say that most of the fascism I'm seeing in the United States is coming from the Democrats, and they want another 4 years, another 8 years, I've no doubt, of cackling Kamala to show it. Now, on the face of it, this operation is successful. I was just looking at a story which swept the world, or a word which swept the word joy, joyous, joyful. They've got to explain, you see, why Kamala Harris keeps bursting into laughter at the most inappropriate things and the most inappropriate time. So they've called it joy. And I saw newspapers all over the world on the same day, and broadcasts and newspapers in the US, every one of them on the same day started to talk about the joy of the Kamala Harris campaign. This is quite an operation, Garland.
And the great success in the operation is creating a dynamic where people have a discussion about the most superficial things when it comes to politics. That when they discuss about politics, it's about joy, it's about good versus evil, it's about stopping a bad guy versus saving, versus addressing a system. What they've really successfully done is thwarted the discussion about systemic problems. In which people like you and I, we talk about imperialism, we talk about systemic problems. I have people call some of my radio shows and basically imply, Donald Trump's going to take this system out and we've got to save it. And I always say the same thing. I am not the cure for this system. I'm the disease. This system is really terrible. And you make a mistake if you look at this horrific system and somehow feel that you've got to stop it, the deterioration of it, you have to save it, as opposed to looking at this system and saying there's nothing you can do to save it. And in fact, you should look forward to a better world, to creating a system that is more just.
Yeah, I mean, it's no longer being pretended, is it, that Joe Biden is running the country? So I'm asking, given the potentially existential issues that I just discussed in my monologue of all-out war in the Middle East, all-out war in the Ukraine, or both of them together, who's in charge of America's response to that? Who decided to send fully 1/3 of the American Navy to the Mediterranean, which is what is there right now?
You know, I think they accidentally tell us when they say when our media, when our politicians say things like "let the market decide." I think they're really telling us who's in charge, because the market is a metaphor for the oligarchs, for the ruling elite. We've got a lot of Zionist billionaires and Zionist money, and we've got Tony Blinken now, who has returned to his home country. He's returned to the country that he actually works for and represents. And so I think what we're looking at is a government where kind of for those of us who understand what's going on, we can see that Kamala Harris, I mean, how absurd is it that she'd be in charge of anything? And Donald Trump, he better watch flying in small planes. I mean, every time I turn around, there's a bullet whizzing by his head. His plane's got to land because it's having mechanical. I think this guy better take a train or maybe a horse and carriage everywhere he goes, because his life is hanging, hanging by a thread right now.
Yeah, absolutely correct. But we are in Queer Street, as we say over here. It's not easy to see a way out of these potentially existential crises that we're in. I'm wondering if, I'm not in Britain at the moment, but I'm wondering if the British people even know it. I'm wondering even more if the American people even know it. Do they?
Absolutely not. And they won't learn it by watching the news. There is some good news amongst all the dark news, and that is that shows like this, that the alternative media is really blossoming right now, and that more and more people are learning what's going on. But the masses in the aggregate have no clue. They're arguing over very, very minor things. I think that in the Middle East, we already have a broader war. The only question is, how does that broader war manifest itself? Does it get to a point where it significantly affects the flow of oil? At which point, if that happens, even if it doesn't, completely blow up where oil is unavailable, but if it gets to a point where there's a significant increase in oil, that will be a wake-up call for people. They'll start asking questions. I can tell you that in America, the one thing that would wake people up would be if they saw, $12, $15, $20 a gallon for oil, they would start asking the questions they need to ask. But as long as they don't feel that kind of pain, they're going to be arguing about, who's a communist and whether Kamala Harris is going to build 3 million houses or something crazy like that.
Or price gauging. Let
Price
me
gauging,
go
exactly.
left field, Garland. I want to go left field with you. And I'm sorry I didn't warn you, because maybe you didn't see it. But I've been looking at a lot of what appear to be extraterrestrial activities in California. I've been looking at footage that the public have taken of what appears to be, I don't know, maybe alien intelligence has come to watch the world blow itself up. Maybe they've come with a warning, don't do it. We implore you. Maybe they've come to negotiate a ceasefire in Gaza. I don't know what. But it looked bizarre to me. Is it a big story in the U.S.?
Well, it's not as big a story as it should be. And I think you make a strong point, and that is, it would be absurd to think that in a universe not of this size, that of infinite size, that we're the only creatures here. So I think it's based on what we've seen over the course of the years when it comes to unidentified objects and et cetera, and unidentified phenomenon. I think it's clear that something's going on. And right now, it makes sense that at a time of such turmoil, at a time when the potential for a nuclear conflict is so high that if there were, which there are, such creatures that they would be significantly concerned. I will say this, and people can look this up. There have been reports, and these came from the U.S. military over the course of the years, last several years, that there have been unidentified objects, whatever you want to call them, that have flown over nuclear facilities, that have scanned nuclear facilities. And, you know, the leaders that we have in the West are so stupid, they're so insane, they're so suicidal, that maybe the only prayer that we have, which is a sad state of affairs, the only prayer that we have is some little green guys from another country comes down, because they can't be any stupider than these people.
Exactly. Let's vote for them. Garland Nixon, as always, thanks very much for joining
Thank
us
you.
on the mother of all talk shows.